Hello everyone, my name is Blake and I am an engineer here at Synametrics Technologies Incorporated. So first I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today for the webinar, and I hope that you find the topic we discussed to be informative and helpful. So there are two parts to this webinar. First, we're going to take some time to discuss Cinnamon and file sharing in the workplace, and at the end we'll be joined by one of my colleagues to answer your questions. You can ask questions at any time through the chat window you see on your screen, however we will answer these questions towards the end of the webinar. So today we're going to discuss some challenges faced by business users who want to share sensitive data with their clients and colleagues. We're going to talk about existing methods used by many individuals, common problems, limitations, risks involved with these methods, and then I'm going to show you how to mitigate these risks by standardizing on a solution that meets your user requirements. So before we begin, I'd like to give you all some background on Synametrics Technologies and who we are. So we've been in business since 1997. Over 100,000 companies use our products, and about 95% of Fortune 500 companies also use one of our products. We're located in New Jersey. Both support and development of every product we publish is based in the US. Most importantly, this means that if you run into any issue, we're just a phone call away and can help you resolve any matter swiftly. Alright, so let's talk about some common methods of how users share files with other business colleagues. And the point I want to emphasize here are the risks involved in not having a standardized solution. So let's face it, when your employees need to share documents, they'll eventually figure out a way of doing so using all sorts of methods, some riskier than others. But the bottom line is that gradually it'll become a nightmare from the administrative perspective to control who is sharing what document and how they're sharing it. One of the most common ways to share files is through a mapped drive within a network. This, however, restricts the access to users within your local area network, and you can't share files with users on the internet. However, I do remember a few years ago, many administrators would also allow shared drives over the internet, and I hope no one does that now because that's just insane today. One very big problem with shared drives is the cryptolocker viruses, which encrypt all user data for ransom, and I'm sure most of you are familiar with this. But imagine if every user shares one specific folder containing a client's sensitive data, and the virus encrypts every file. That would definitely end up with someone losing their job, and we don't want that to happen. So when we talk about file sharing in the workplace, we need to talk about email, because email obviously is a natural choice to share files. However, email was never designed to handle large attachments, and there are several reasons for this, one being that emails are typically never deleted from an email server. When you allow large attachments to be sent, the email database will eventually grow to a point where it will become very difficult to maintain. However, more importantly, the size of a file sent via email attachment is not really in your hands. Consider this example. So John needs to send an email to Mary, who works for a different company. On average, every email will most likely go through around 3 to 4 SMTP servers before reaching its final destination. Every server has its own configuration as far as the largest file size and attachment size. In this image, the third SMTP server is configured to reject emails larger than 20 megabytes. Therefore, even if you configure your server to accept a 50 megabyte attachment, the message will probably be rejected by one of the servers downstream. And another problem with email is there's no audit trail. So you don't know if the attachment was shipped by some email filtering system on its way to the destination, or maybe the entire message was blocked altogether. And then you got users coming to you asking, where did my email go? And there's no real way for you to find out. And emails are often insecure. So emails get processed through any third-party service providers. You have no control over who can open and view the content. So we just mentioned third-party. So third-party file sharing is a very common method used these days, especially with several companies offering their own solutions. The way this works is the sender uploads a file to a third-party service provider, and the recipient downloads it from their site. This third party serves as a broker between the sender of the data and the receiver of the data. Now, although every company claims that your files are encrypted and that nobody will have access to them, there is always a risk involved. From a technical perspective, when you use a browser to upload files, encryption occurs at the destination. So this means that the encryption key is also on the destination, therefore can be decrypted without your knowledge. This is assuming encryption is even there in the first place. And aside from privacy, there's tons of other factors to consider, such as bandwidth limits, file sizes, storage limits, and most companies put a cap on these numbers and charge you a premium if you go over their assigned limits, which are typically, not that large. More so, their pricing is typically based on the number of users. So the more users in your company, the more you will be spending on a solution, and anybody in this industry will tell you that money is always a factor. So the bottom line question is, how much return on investment are you going to get when you're spending a monthly fee based on the number of users and the amount of data they're transferring? So I bet this number is going to add up over the course of a few years to a value that you may not be willing to pay. But at that point, they already have your data, so you're almost forced to sink even more money into it. So let's talk about a better solution. From a security perspective, the biggest challenge in any industry is how to reduce the risks involved when getting any third party involved. Doesn't matter how strong of an encryption they promise, there's always a chance someone could take a peek at your data. So what do we do? So in this case, if we don't want someone to take a peek, the best solution is just eliminate the middleman. Why do you need someone to broker the in-between area when you're sharing sensitive data with your clients and colleagues? That's just for you and them. Second, when files are transferred, data should be encrypted using industry standard methods like SSL. Importantly, the cost of the solution should not be based on file size or bandwidth used or the number of users. It should integrate with the layout of your existing website for a seamless user experience. It should work with regular emails, as most business communication occurs through email, and therefore it will be nice if your users compose an email with a large attachment and the recipient can still get the message. It should also provide a complete audit trail of what has taken place. And finally, why should you pay a monthly fee? So this is where Synamen comes in. Synamen meets all of these requirements at a fraction of the cost you'll spend on third-party services. First, Synamen is a product. It's not a service. This means that you purchase it once and use it forever. There's no monthly fee, no limits on file sizes, no limits on bandwidth, and you can create as many users as you want for a one-time fee. You can install Synamen on a variety of operating systems. However, we always recommend installing it on a file server. But if you don't want to install it on your machine, you can always download a virtual machine image from our site and test it out. Installing Synamen is very simple. On Windows, all you need to do is double-click the setup. Towards the end, you'll be presented with a web page allowing you to configure some parameters. There's no need to set up any web servers or database servers. Administration access is also 100% web-based, so your admins can simply go to the URL and they'll be good to go. And finally, users on the internet will be able to upload and download files directly to the computer where Synamen is installed. No third party necessary. So when we talk about security next, security is the #1 design goal in Synamen. For example, SSL is used while connecting to the web interface, and a complete audit trail exists letting administrators know who logged in, who uploaded, who downloaded, who moved files, who renamed files, everything you need to know. Email alerts are also generated if suspicious activity is detected, and email notifications are sent when a user uploads or downloads files. File access is also granular, so this means that you determine who gets access to which folder. Files belonging to one user will never be seen by other users unless they explicitly grant them permissions. You also have the option to use two-factor authentication, so this will allow users to enter a 6-digit code they'll get on their mobile device or their email that they can use to access Synamen. So next I want to talk about some important concepts in Synamen. So every user can optionally have a home folder. No other user will have access to a user's home folder. The actual location of this folder is assigned when you create new users in Synamen. Second, there's a concept of virtual folders. Consider a scenario where you're dealing with two clients, client A and client B. You can store files belonging to client A in, let's say, C cases client A, and for client B in C cases client B. A virtual folder, folder 1, is just a name assigned to the actual path on the disk. There are many-to-many relationships between users and virtual folders, meaning one user could have access to multiple folders and one folder can be assigned to multiple users. But for example, a user Mary who identified by user 1 could have access to folder 1, folder 2, and folder 3, but Jack, who is identified as user 2, only has access to folder 2. Alright, so let's talk about some key features of Synamen. So when you use Synamen, you can use your regular email client to send large attachments, and I'll go over this in a little more detail on the next slide. But you can create public links, which are temporary URLs or web addresses that you can share with your business colleagues. For example, if you want one of your clients to upload a video file that's, let's say, 1 gigabyte, using Synamen's web interface, you would create a URL allowing your client to upload this file in a particular folder of your choice. The client will not be able to do anything besides upload the files. They can't see any of the folders. They can't see any other files within this folder. All they can do is upload files. Similarly, if you create a public link for download, they will only be able to download the files you want them to download. They won't be able to do anything else or see anything else. And these public links can optionally have expiration dates and passwords as well, so you can, make it a little bit more secure, tailor it to, confidentiality agreements or whatever you need to do. You can also integrate the layout of Syname's web interface with your corporate website, which gives a, seamless user experience to your clients. If you use Active Directory in your company, users in Syname can also be associated with AD, allowing them to use the same credentials they use for their Windows account. And in terms of sort of keeping a lid on how much data you're allowing each user to put in their home folder, you can assign a quota for each of their home folders. So this will kind of let them, have a maximum limit on how much they're allowed to have up there at one time. And finally, files that are on Syname can be accessed from any mobile device, such as iPhone, iPad, or any devices running Android. So now I'm going to talk about how you can send large files that are attached to an email message. Syname comes with an embedded SMTP server. It is designed to accept large attachments. Rather than just forwarding the message as is, it'll detach the large attachments and replace them with an HTML link. So this results in a very small email with a download link, allowing the final recipient to download the actual file. So there are two ways to send emails to Syname. You configure your email client, such as Outlook or Thunderbird, and specify Syname for the SMTP server. Or you install a plugin in Outlook, which sends the attached file to Syname. In either case, the final email does not include the actual attached file. Instead, the recipient will download the file using the web interface. Okay, so this concludes today's webinar discussion. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this presentation over to my colleague. His name is Imran, and he will be here to answer any questions you might have.